Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the TechConnect podcast with American Global. Today, we're diving into one of the most important shifts happening in construction right now, the evolution of supply chain from an operational issue into a strategic driver of risk and performance. Global trade volatility, tariffs, logistical disruptions, and regulatory changes like CARM are reshaping how contractors think about projects. This is forcing a shift from reacting to problems to proactively managing uncertainty. Today, we'll explore what contractors are seeing on the ground, how global forces are impacting local projects, and what this means for risk, insurance, and decision-making going forward. We're going to talk a little bit about the technology and innovation coming around in this space. But I am happy to be joined by some of my friends and colleagues here, Giovanni Cautillo, Eric Cote, and Tracy McLean. Tracy, do you want to just start with an introduction of yourself, please?
Sure. Hi, Chris. Thanks for the invitation. I'm looking forward to the conversation. I'm SVP of Surety and Insurance at American Global. My area of expertise is working with supply chain management companies, particularly customs brokers. We've developed some innovation around the new policy and regulation changes with CARM. So I'm excited about today's conversation.
Perfect. Well, welcome and thank you for joining. Eric?
Yes, Eric Cote. I've been with the CGQ, it says the General Contractors Corporation of Quebec for the last 8 years, involved in construction for the last 15. And I'm basically coming out from the political world. So I'm a policy, I'm not an architect, an engineer, nor a lawyer, but I'm a very interested person in risk-taking about the entrepreneurs and making the construction industry a better place and a nicer place to work in.
Perfect. Welcome, Eric. Giovanni?
Giovanni Cautillo, the president for the Ontario General Contractors Association. Eric, you don't have to apologize for not being a lawyer. We actually appreciate that. We have enough of them.
Thank God.
Yeah, exactly. So I've done like 20-something years in construction, plus I was a general contractor before that. So I've been in the association realm representing contractors both on the labor relations side and now obviously just on the GC side. So it's a lot more fun when you babysit contractors.
Well, we've got a politician, we've got an entrepreneur, we've got an SME here. I think it's going to be a lively conversation. My name is Chris Green. I am the SVP of Innovation and Insight at American Global. And I'm lucky enough to dive into this conversation around supply chain and CARM with these experts in front of me here. We're going to go through what the reality of the world is today, what contractors are facing. Giovanni, I see you sticking already. So
we'll hold on to your seats, everybody, because
it's going to be a wild ride.
You want reality, we'll give it to you.
Yeah.
In both reality from Ontario and Quebec, so I think we're going to cover a lot of what Canada is facing here. We'll talk about some of the global pressures. Stuff is happening locally for our contractors that is happening overseas that's impacting projects here locally. We'll talk about the new technology and innovation on the CARM and risk side. I know, Tracy, you are probably the foremost expert in Canada, so we're lucky to be able to have you here to talk about that. Talk about adaptation and how contractors can actually move forward and navigate these this new world of supply chain and what to do going forward. What does the future look like, and how do we help our contractors do well in Canada? So let's just start with the reality of things. Eric, why don't I just kick things off with you? Just like going back to being grounded as a contractor, what's the experience? What are you hearing from our members today? Is it still cost, or has the conversation shifted towards uncertainty and predictability?
Well, you talk about navigate in your intro, and, I've been talking about the perfect storm we're in. We have the wages, the materials, the political, and all things joining up together and doing something bigger than we expected. And the unpredictability of things is surely the thing that people are starting to get used to, but don't like. But are things going to go up? Are there going to be tariffs? There's so many things that you have to put in your computer and when you reflect on things, what's going to happen and to expect. And as a political buff, I see these things, and it's interesting. But I wouldn't want to run a business in this era. And I'm so fond of these people that take the risk and try to manage. So all we do is trying to get these people to manage through these things and to have a lot more information that they can to manage, because that's the key to these things is information. don't panic. Don't go buy materials in the period when you think you're going to go up, you're going to get stuck with it or not. But there's so many things, but information is the base, and people have to talk, and that's where I think is the solution.
Yeah, in some cases, I find people don't even know where to go to get the help or the resources that they need. Right?
They're stuck. They're there, and they come to our meetings and they learn things. And they go, okay, I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
There are so many things that they don't think about that are new, and that's the idea where they need us, and where we suddenly feel useful as an association. Giovanni probably can say the things. You know, I sell. Usually, you have these people that the free goats or the free range people. They don't need associations. But when these things happen, and when you don't read in the paper and you don't see, you have to talk with your peers and understand these things.
Yeah, and you're right. You know, change is becoming the norm. Unpredictability is here to stay. I don't think that we'll never get back to the point where the good old days, right?
It's over.
We'll have to, yeah.
Well, and Chris, we went from just on time delivery where people got used to, you know, they could just order a part, they could just order a piece, and it would be delivered, boom, instantaneously. Mm-hmm. Now we're in a time of, as you said, uncertainty, Eric, and with that uncertainty, the planning, the education, everything that goes into that, it's making it really difficult for people to learn how to pivot in real time, instantaneously.
Yeah, and we'll get into some of the resources that the associations can do to help contractors, the SMEs like you, Tracy. Giovanni, how do you feel about what Eric said from an Ontario perspective? Is it the same thing, or what are your contractors saying to you?
When it comes down to reality, I think it's similar, 100%, but I think we have a compounding factor because now we have this Buy Ontario legislation that's come in that, you know, we have to try and get everything sourced through either Ontario or Canada. And no one is against it. In principle, 100% we support it. The problem is that the engagement and the logistics of it doesn't make any sense. Right. It can't be done. We still have interprovincial tariffs, for God's sakes. Right. So until they come down, it won't work properly. And then on top of it, you're making it so that there's liquidated damages if you don't have enough Canadian content. And so instead of a carrot, they're using a stick. So this is not something that the contractors are looking at and saying, great, let's move forward with this. It's a good concept, but the implementation, they have not rolled it out properly, and it's been left to the industry to figure things out. And the problem is that no one knows. So everyone's asking us, and we don't know. So we're trying to engage with Infrastructure Ontario, with the government, and get answers. Unfortunately, it's a big black hole. At this point in time, the reality is that change is going to happen sooner, and no one knows what's going on. So that's just one aspect. I can go on and on and on, but let's because again, we also talk about just in time. That was great. That worked. Now it doesn't. And on top of it, we have issues at the border with their electronics and their IT system, so we can't get products in. Logistically speaking, if you're going to truck something from anywhere, you're now paying through the nose. So if you have a fixed sum contract, how are you getting this stuff up and getting it so that it fits into your price point? You've calculated one thing, and then everything goes out the window as soon as the Strait of Hormuz is blocked, or there's another war going on, or Trump decides that he's going to send out another tweet and piss off the rest of the world. Anyway, that's just...
So, I mean, there's a lot of angst, I think, right, across the country, and a lot of uncertainty, like you said. Is anyone doing a good job of navigating these waters, or are they kind of banding together to try to figure out what to do next?
I think it's a bit of smart people get through, but smart is not enough now. There are so many things unpredictable. And the new pressure that the GCs have is, what about the cost of these projects? So we face the clients, and they turn to us and say, I don't want to pay that much for the thing. I'm not allowed. And there's the discussion about sharing risk with them, and we're not there with everyone. But that's one thing. And we've been having pressure from our client in Quebec is the government. The government is looking at saying, how come it's so expensive for the projects? And they've been doing studies, and they've been poking us, and then we turn around and say, well, it's because of the regulations. All the choices we made in the past are getting bad at us in a situation of unpredictability. These things are rigid, and they make us more difficult to figure out to share the cost or to lower the cost or just control the cost. But at this moment, maximizing each dollar invested in construction is a tough job in strict regulations.
Mm-hmm.
Eric, you can ask, the buyers of construction, have they turned on the television or have they looked at their cell phone lately? Because that's all you have to do to figure out that things aren't as they were. There is no more good old days or business as usual. Everything's out the door and everything changes a la minute. So like this is something that, we are, unfortunately, we can't be proactive to. We have to react to it. And so that's the state of our industry right now.
There are conscious people that trying to figure out these things, and the Municipalities Union in Quebec made a study. A fire station from 2015 to 2025 has increased 120% on the price. Right. They discovered that 15% of that increase is responsible of regulations by the government. 15% more. So, and try to build not against it. Try to build, freely, not following the codes. You're going to get kicked out of the market pretty soon. Sure. And so that's it.
Well, that's where it starts into just what you were saying, the policy conversation. Everybody's not taking into account. Yes, we all support made in Canada, made in a particular province, obviously. But the challenge becomes the cost. And nobody's talking about our labor costs and all the other costs that go with that. It starts as a trickle-down effect. And sourcing, even if it is by Ontario, there could be a widget, there could be a part that's being imported from another country. Is that part of the new policy and regulations? Is that allowed? These are all the things that I think we are talking about and finding out. I spend a lot of time on the ground talking to the different associations and hearing this. And I think that it's great that you guys are taking a very proactive approach for your members, because they're being forced to have to pivot. And pivoting means those additional costs have to come from somewhere. So are they building that into their contracts? Are they building that in a trickle down to their suppliers? That's part of what I want to talk about today. I think that's where we'll get into some of the meat and potatoes, as we call it.
We also found on the Buy Ontario stuff, it's a very, I'm going to use the term knee-jerk reaction. Okay, Trump says something, so, in retaliation, boom, we're going to issue Buy Ontario. That's great and all, but logistically speaking, do we even manufacture this stuff here? Have we ever manufactured it here? So if we haven't, it's going to take decades for it to be built up in the industry. You can't and you've got to support the manufacturers. Right now, just saying we're going to buy Ontario, it's a great concept, but in reality, it can't be done.
No.
Not for every concept, not for every part of construction.
No. And CUSMA is, even though we're going under conversation on the agreement, it doesn't just flip off in June, July when we start the conversations. It's in effect, it's a long road ahead. And so, again, we want to make sure that, to your point, Giovanni, we don't want to be making knee-jerk, decisions. We need to have imports coming in. All these trade agreements are in everyone's best interest. It's finding a balance. I always say we got to find a balance between how we support Canadian and how we understand that doing business with other countries is in our best interest. That not only helps imports, but it helps our exports as well.
Last January, we were hoping for the federal government to not to put counter tariffs on certain things, some equipment's coming from the States, because it was going to make the cost of projects explode. And they said, you have to figure out a way. You can't do it, and we can't build it here, or we don't have the infrastructure to build it here. So we want, HVAC systems made in Canada, but there's so little done. So if you just can't put it on a sheet and say that's the rule now, it doesn't exist. And the poor guy who's going to produce them is going to go crazy, because it's going to be such a mass effect of trouble for his whole
supply and
company.
Demand. It's impossible. To your point earlier, there's no way. We can't meet. That's part of what the U.S. are going to have the challenge too. They can't meet the supply and demand. You can't just turn it on and turn it off. It takes years to get up to that. So
if you're lucky, it takes years.
Lucky.
It takes decades in order to create the manufacturing and everything and the infrastructure that can supply it all. On top of it, understand that the tariffs from the States, this is not going to go away.
It's not going to go away.
Even if, the administration is gone and the new administration comes in, this is their new way of doing things, period. It's not going to change. So we have to understand, from our standpoint, these tariffs are going to be there and the cost of buildings will increase. accordingly, because that's what we have to do. If you're going to get it from the States, it's one thing. So, unless we've got other sources, either European or Mexican or Chinese, doesn't matter. Globally, we have to look at things. Can we pull in these parts this way? If we can, then great, we can continue building, but there is always a cost because, again, gasoline, diesel, everything has gone up. Shipping, everything has gone up. Just getting people is hard. Like, it's not just one thing. If it was one thing that we could zone in on, that'd be great. But unfortunately, there's a plethora of issues.
I think that's a great point. The training and development side, it always gets overlooked. And I think that is absolutely critical in the go forward in these conversations because we have a huge gap. And I think it's easy to say, yeah, we need to help people get back to work. But again, all of that planning, once you make these announcements, they have completely missed the mark on all the other pieces that are relevant and important in that conversation. So
we don't know what the future is going to look like, I think, right? But I mean, Tracy, with the reality for your clients, you've been doing this for quite a while. What changes have you seen in how they're feeling, what they're doing, how they're operating when it comes to shipping and receiving across the border?
So as some of you may or may not know, recently in the past, 2024, the Canadian Border Security Agency, CBSA, introduced their new initiative. Now, this initiative, CARM, the Canadian Accounts Receivable Management Portal, because that's what it is, it's a portal, required the shift away from customs brokers managing that risk. Customs brokers used to hold security with the government, with CBSA, in order to allow goods to come into the border seamlessly, and they managed all of that. They're still very engaged, if not even more now, relevant in the supply chain because their expertise in knowing what's required. Classification codes are constantly changing, let alone the tariffs, SEMA. We have all kinds now. We've got the forced labor laws coming into effect. So they're, again, on top of all of the things that are happening, we've got, yes, all these policy and regulation changes. What this means is the shift in security is now expected on importers. So any commercial importer importing into Canada is now required to register with the CBSA, obtain a business number, and then they go through either the choice of posting cash with the Government of Canada as a form of security, where it would be 100%, or they can post a release prior to payment security through a surety company for 50% of their required security. So that's creating a huge shift in policy, regulation, and change. And, companies were prepared, but they weren't prepared. And that was all, again, dependent on where did they source the materials. So I think that has had a massive shift. And then with everything that's happening globally, that's creating new challenges, 100%.
So are your clients figuring this out right now? Like, how is the CARM launch been going so far?
So the CARM launch was just in a meeting with Canada Border and Security Agency recently, and they just released the numbers that 213,000 importers have registered effective January 2026 with CBSA. So that's starting from zero. So now a lot of those importers are learning, but most of that is managed still through the customs broker, helping them in securing that risk. Even though the importer is the required party to hold the security with CBSA, customs brokers have been instrumental in helping to get that communication out, helping to navigate what they need to do, how they need to register. So I have always worked predominantly with customs brokers because I found that they're that sort of underrated, expert in the supply chain. And now we've seen a huge response with importers realizing working with the right customs broker is relevant to helping them get those goods through the border. And I think that's going to ramp up more and more as more trade talks come on. So we've been very proactive in working with those customs brokers and importers to help them get ready for CARM, making sure that they know that we have used technology very proactively to help mitigate, reduce that friction, make sure that there's an ease of doing business, there's clear communication on what the expectations are and how they go about doing it, and it's working really, really well. So it's helping with that. And, 213,000 is a lot. And it's growing because we're going to see more and more importers. Now that Canada is getting recognized on the world scale, that's becoming relevant and people wanting to look at how they can work with companies here. So I think going back to that Buy Ontario, Buy Canadian, this is also where we're going to start to see more opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Eric and Giovanni, are your association members, do they know about CARM? Is this new? Because this hasn't been launched for very long. It was a big change. It's really hard to roll out something nationally. What are your members kind of talking about this, or are they facing any challenges importing and exporting across the border?
Well, this is the new dilemmas that we have, the new risk you have to manage. You have to understand the trades, material and stuff, and the supply chains even more now. And since you can't get it from the States, you try to get it elsewhere. The architect won't like that material, so we have to those equivalents and stuff like that. But so we have to. I didn't know as much as a few months ago about these things, and I started to expose these things to our members so they understand. Doing a conference with a trades lawyer, so you understand.
It's new for a lot of people.
And he explained to us, what the documents we need to see and check,
right.
so we don't, so the entrepreneurs don't pay the tariffs double time, or just they see it on the bill. There's proper documents for these things. So just making sure the people know about these things was a new variable to put in the system.
Yeah.
So,
Giovanni, you brought up the training and education, and Tracy, you mentioned that too, right? It's more important now than ever before, I think, just to teach people like this is happening and these are the changes, and you have to learn to navigate this if you want to operate successfully.
100%. But we've also got different sizes of companies. So you've got small, medium, and large. And some of the larger ones may know about this and have engaged in it and already are on the list and whatnot. But I'm fearful that some of the smaller and medium ones they're not even in the mix yet.
Yeah.
Again, to Eric's point, they don't know what's coming down the pipeline. This is all problematic because this just makes it more and more difficult, and it may erode the basis of contractors. Because if the smaller contractors start to fall off because it's too difficult to do business in Ontario or Quebec, then it just leaves larger and larger and larger contractors. And that becomes, again, we don't want a monopoly. We want competition to reign. We want to be able to compete on projects. But unfortunately, the government is getting in the way of allowing for this to be built properly without encumbrances. The government puts blockades. They think it's a good idea, but at no point did they ask the industry, what do you think?
Yeah, they don't understand the burden to business. Sometimes even when they were doing CARM, it was a 10-year process, and government, we're having conversation with industry. But again, ultimately, the portal was designed, naturally so, to suffice what the government required in regards to ensuring that any duties and taxes that are owed need to be transparent, need to be visible, and need to be collected. Mm-hmm. So they've changed the timelines, and all of that, again, becomes a burden to business. It's not that business won't accept the change. Let's be clear about that. But to your point, exactly. The conversation now shifts to how do we help these businesses understand that there are resources available? Where do they go? Who do they talk to? How can they get it? What's the cost? All of that becomes relevant now.
And as Giovanni said, people think it's only a period that we're going through and things are going to go back to normal. I was listening to Jean Charest, who at a conference, and I heard it twice. He was talking about, we're not going back to what we were before, and you get prepared for that. But then, who has the setup in their companies for all these things and about these things? So sometimes the idea is probably to step back, as the smaller players will go. The clever ones will find a way in things, but some of them won't put the effort in, and they say, "Well, I can't do it," or and so they put the pressure elsewhere. And if you have less people building and doing these things, you have less competition, and the prices go up again. Mm-hmm. And that's the truth throughout the world, and so it's kind of this kind of gloomy. So you don't want to go there. So you have to find a way. And we have a monthly meeting about a local economy. We do it on Teams, and we invite people. Everybody's welcome. So you're not even a GC.
You have a perspective still. You have
be part of the conversation to understand these things, and we invite I told you I should invite you. You're set up for.
I'll be there, Eric.
I got
I'll
a
be
date
there.
for you, and
Okay.
talking about these things because people don't know. They just think it's magic, and free trade. When did that stop? And that's it.
But I think when we started the conversation talking about these infrastructure projects, right? And I think that's exactly the conversation now is everybody is excited about all these new deals and everything that's happening. But I think now we need to, even you being here today, both of you, talking about what's going on with your associations. I mean, that demonstrates, let alone talking with government, but the more that we can all work together to address it's not just a one person problem. This affects everybody top down all the way around. So
if this conversation and the fact that you've only got general contractors in the room or representatives of general contractors, we are literally the tip of the iceberg. Because when you look at it, you forget we sub out 80% of the work to sub-trades. And so, from the top down, this becomes
huge
exponentially difficult, especially when you get, smaller and smaller than sub-trades. And they're necessary in order to complete the work. And so the government, I think, is being very myopic in what they're doing because they're saying, oh, this will fix it and this will fix it. When no one, and I'm going to be blunt about this, none of them own construction boots. None of them have actually set foot on a construction site or understand the logistics behind a construction site and how difficult it is. They look at it only from what soundbite can I get? Let me throw it out there and say, oh, we're going to do this. Now we fixed it. And if anything, you've caused it a bigger problem for the industry to then kind of navigate, and that becomes problematic. So, again, this is just the thin edge of the wedge here. I think we're going to get much, much worse as time goes.
Yeah, we're at the tipping point, I think, in this situation. And to get me and Giovanni in the studio to talk about it truly means
a big deal.
Something's happened.
We appreciate that.
So no, but it's true. But we don't get to sit together, but we do the same thing on each side. And now we have to join forces to again, like we did in the past, to face these things. That perfect storm is there, and we have to help these guys. And we can't do it only we speak for GCs, but we don't only deal with GCs. We have to open up. We have to talk with the trades. We have to talk with the professionals, the architects, the engineers, the owner. And this time we learned it. COVID showed us we have to talk and we'll work together. And this time we're not going to just go on our side.
I think now more so than ever before, Giovanni, the small to mid-sized players, like you said, are going to be heavily reliant on the associations to teach them and give them the resources and the knowledge and know-how in navigating this world. Because I think even the large players, they don't want to have a monopoly. I think they actually want to have a good economy in Canada. They want to have a good long-term work plan, and they want to support everyone else. So now more so than ever, the associations, I think, are going to be heavily relied on.
Supply chain management, they're looking at it, they're having the same conversations with their members, and the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters Association, like manufacturers, like everybody is trying to understand how can we all work together, because collectively we do have the same issues. Individually there's different regional challenges, but collectively the principle behind what is happening is there. We all have the same issues.
And the idea is people think, I had an idea. I thought I have the truth. I have the solution. Then I start talking to other kind of trades and people, and I saw the impact of the idea that I had. And I flushed it. And I went back to the drawing board, started talking with these people and say, let's find a common ground for something that works. And
Tracy, to your point, you have all of these, separate groups talking, but no one is ever talking together. It's all siloed. This is the big problem. Yep. And so my big thing about, again, I'm going to go back to the Buy Ontario because it's affecting all of our members right now, is the fact they haven't reached out to manufacturing and construction and supply chain and all of that, brought them all in together and say, hey, how do we do this?
Right.
And asked us for our input. Instead, they shoot first and then ask questions. That's not the right way to do things. It causes this backstream effect now. Now we've got this huge backlog. No one knows exactly how to navigate it. We've got all these infrastructure issues because they want all these projects pushed forward. Okay, but how do we now do it and apply the proper legislation that you've put up 3 different barriers for us to do. How do we hurdle this? And so I think it's, again, I go back to the term myopic. They've done it without really including everyone. It's problematic and it's frustrating. And we can teach our members as much as we can. It doesn't make it go faster. The walls and projects and transit, all this stuff isn't going to be built that much faster because we're still waiting for product and people. And it's a very...
And they got a good soundbite. That's it.
And they got a great soundbite.
Sounds good, sells good, but it probably means some people will have more work. But at the same time, there are so many products crossing the borders, and you have aluminum that is starting in one part, it goes to the States, goes
in
back,
Canada, then
goes back
States,
to
and then
Ontario,
back and
goes back to here. So
that was the beauty of CUSMA. The whole point of CUSMA was to allow that free border to exist so goods could move seamlessly. And that was, and still is, to, the mutual benefit.
Don't hold your breath.
We're not holding our breath on, no. We absolutely know that.
And we start to see
days.
people who decide, they quit and they say, okay, I'm going to put my plant in the States, or I don't want to have to deal with that. My market's in the States, so they go in the States. And so that means that we're losing people. It's like you're losing muscle, and in a way, you're not going to get this back. So it's
entropy.
But that goes to the whole principle of what we're talking about. We all have to think differently. We have to approach the problem with a different mindset, with a different ideology around, just like what we started the conversation. What happened yesterday is not going to happen tomorrow.
But I go back to the training education that you were talking about, Chris. It's got to start with the buyers of construction. Okay, we get it. And again, we can pivot, we're nimble, whatever, adjective you want to put in there. But the buyers of construction haven't changed their contracts, haven't changed their way of doing things
That's
for
a whole
50
other topic,
years.
yeah.
That's another
and so
topic.
They haven't changed it, but they expect a different outcome. That's literally the definition of insanity. So we're sitting here spinning our wheels. Some days I feel like I'm in a hamster wheel.
Right.
I was like, why are we doing the same thing over and over again? And they say, but why is it so expensive? But you're asking for us to do this and do it for less money? How? If everything else has gone up. I go, does gas cost you less? Does groceries cost you less? Like, no. So how can you translate that to construction and expect it to be less? It doesn't make any sense.
Well, and you're right. That whole race to the bottom, that's not going to work in today's environment going forward. And I think you're right. We have to start the conversation at the top, and we have to get them to understand that the bottom line, the cheapest price is going to create other issues, for sure.
So the tech solutions, Tracy, that's out there with CARM in this launch, is that more of a compliancy thing, or is that a strategic thing that should take a long-term?
It's both. It's both. It meets the compliance requirements, because I think that's the challenge that a lot of people are trying to navigate as well, is not only are they looking at the business side, but they have to meet these new compliance requirements. So in the development with CARM, it provided an opportunity to shift and change, to not only change who's the responsible, liable party to the Government of Canada, to CBSA, but also to shift how we do business. So utilizing technology, moving away from paper bonds. We can have a whole other podcast on where the construction industry could take some change in regards to pivoting. But maybe now that the federal government is accepting this inside a portal, API, distribution model.
It's not a bad thing on paper,
it's
right?
Not a bad
I think
thing.
it's innovation.
Right.
It should move things along faster, but it is a huge change, right?
Right. It's a huge shift. Yeah. But again, we found once we got into those weeds, going back to the problem-solving conversation, that's what created the change. We looked at ways then to be proactive, to look at the centers of influence in an ecosystem and build it out so we could help, especially those SMEs, know that they could go to get the resources they need through the customs brokerage community. And the customs brokerage community, through technology that we invented and created, allowed them to meet those CARM requirements. All CARM cared about was that the surety industry, those that chose, developed and committed to meeting the requirements to transmit data through an API. We then created that infrastructure and that ecosystem to meet those requirements. So SMEs now are learning that when they need to meet that, they don't have to get caught in the weeds. They don't have to try to figure out, where am I going to go? how am I going to meet that requirement?
So on the insurance side, has that changed how we underwrite? Has that changed bonding considerations?
100%.
Can we tell us a little about that?
Underwriting a customs broker in the past was very different than underwriting the direct importer. So understanding where that origin of that importer is doing business. This is another example of the government looking at changing or meeting the new requirements of health and safety. Do they know where that, to your point, if they're looking at businesses outside all of the different countries and trade deals, do they know who they're doing business with? Are they using forced labor? All of that has now become really relevant in understanding where you're sourcing these materials. So the compliance piece, yes, but then the technology is helping to make the friction, the actual ability to do business quicker, faster, underwriting the actual risk. So knowing on that risk, we're seeing it already with the tariffs. People that onboarded into CARM met the new minimum requirements, but now they're being underwritten. The government can now have visibility and transparency to see what's coming into the country, how frequently is it coming into the country. And a lot of people don't realize that CBSA and CRA never traded data information. I mean, to you guys, that's probably not, but a lot of people don't realize
we're used to have agencies not talk to each other.
Right, exactly.
That's our daily grind.
So I think, again, hearing from your industries is really relevant in connecting those dots in conversation so we can find ways to be more proactive.
I want to touch upon a point that you raised, Tracy, about risk. Do you know that contractors price risk? That's the job. That's the nature of the job when it comes down to it. Right. They ascertain what's the risk on this project, how long will it take. They pull all that together and they give you a price. And the old way of doing things about the lump sum prices and the race to the bottom doesn't work anymore in this day and age. You know, you have to think of more alliance models, more IPD models, where we're working together, where the owner's actually at the table and understands the risk. Because right now, all they want to do is download the risk onto the general contractor, and that doesn't always work. It may work on a small warehouse that you're building because it's nice and easy, but we talk about technology, we talk about innovations. It's getting more and more complex to build a hospital, to build transit, to build all of this stuff. It's not the same as it was before. And governments and all buyers of construction have to understand it and internalize it, that it's the good old days are gone. I think we've established that. I think if anyone gets anything from this podcast, the good old days are gone. And the state of constant change is here. So, welcome to the brave new world. We just have to navigate it. But again, we should be doing this together. Again, everyone is doing this in silos, but no one is facilitating a broader spectrum conversation with all aspects that are affected by this. And instead, we're just going to keep spinning our wheels, and that's problematic.
And great point, because talking about risk again, we, through CARM, we are assessing that importer can meet the financial requirements. In other words, a GC doesn't want to get caught that they thought they were doing business with a viable company, and then all of a sudden they realize that they are not. So now they got to pivot again, and they got to find another company that can meet that requirement.
Yeah,
so
but
again,
that company has to be in Ontario now. Next thing you know, you can't.
So that's going to be the interesting, exactly. But like I said, maybe that's the conversation with the government to understand that, yes, we support Buy Ontario, but you're going to have to maybe get that bolt or that widget's going to have to be manufactured somewhere else, because it's the only way to get it. You're not going to be able to source something. You can't force manufacturing if it's impossible to manufacture the widget.
And
here.
if we haven't done it here before, or
right.
If we had manufacturing in Ontario and we let it go by the wayside 50 years ago, to bring it back, it's going to take decades.
Yep.
Again, I reiterate this point. It's not something about a switch. They expect the switch to be turned on. Yeah. Okay, now we can start doing aluminum here. No, we can't. We don't have the processing
Technology is going to change everything.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
But I'm joking.
Sure,
but
AI will fix everything.
Yeah,
but can AI pour concrete? No.
So
we still need the people.
Does AI wake up at the morning and shows up at the
job
site?
site.
And, but you talk about risk, and people are starting to more and more understand risk. They're constructors, calculate risk, and they're now risk managers in themselves, and you have to make the other side or your owner understand the risk he has, and you have to share these things to understand. So if
they want to understand, that's the problem, because a lot of this is no longer, there's nobody in construction.
Not my problem. I know.
That's the problem. It's a procurement set. The procurement decides, legal told us to put this in the contract, and now you price it. And we're sitting there going, it doesn't make any sense.
We had a little study we did with the architects and the engineers, all the consulting engineers, and the subs, and we asked 700 people, do you do business with this owner? Do you do business? And we ask why not? So we had 35% of people walking away from jobs from different owners, public owners mostly, and federal, and so because people know the kind of risk they're asking us, we're not going to go. Well, the first risk, not getting paid. Prompt payment is there now, but there are new risks that show up after that. But not getting paid is a risk.
Yeah.
So making sure you get the interest, because you have to wait for 120, 50, 3 months, is now part. And or having a schedule that is insane, and because the money runs out at March 31st, so the job has to be done at March 1st. That schedule is impossible. It's not technically possible. It is administratively possible, but there's a risk. So, and if you pay late fees,
liquidated damages, exactly.
Yeah, and and I was talking to owners. I said, do you know that we calculate the number of days?
Absolutely.
We include the number of days you want us to
Contractors
deliver.
aren't dumb. They price this stuff.
So well, the owners didn't know that.
How can you not? You put it in the clause. You have in the contracts is like so much for every day.
They do it to force you, and they think they forced you. No. No, you paid for that. And we started telling that. We did a study with 700 people, telling them that, and they started putting the IPD in the laws and stuff like that, and but they understand the risk. But on a low level, small public owners, they don't know these things. They don't understand.
No, they don't. And again, this goes back to if you start getting into the contract conversation, which, yes, I think we may do that as a next series, right, Chris? I think that
episode
would be
number
a good
2.
Episode number 2.
We'll talk for a week.
Because, exactly. But I think, again, like the CRIMS, like the Canadian Risk Insurance Managers is coming up in Quebec. And these are conversations where I think even the risk managers in the insurance industry need to be hearing from relevant industry and understanding that, again, one problem can't get solved unless we all get in the room, whether we agree or disagree. That's part of what makes this great, is that at least we're having conversations and we're not afraid to talk about the things that people don't want to talk about.
And you want a full circle there. We were talking about a small business not going into these, going for these kind of work, and walking away. Well, sometimes it was the larger one, and the government said, you mean people are not going to come for projects?
Right.
It's a privilege to work for the government, but they changed their rules. And it's getting there, but it's slow, and it's really
I'm sure
tough.
Tracy will be happy to speak with your memberships and just do some sessions to further the education and the know-how.
Even with Canada Border Security Agency, like they are, again, we agree to disagree, but I think we try to make sure that we are understanding what their expectation is, whether we do agree or disagree, and then trying to do what we can to meet those expectations to the best of our
temper
ability.
the expectations.
Yeah.
I think
We might need you to work with Ontario and Quebec.
exactly.
No, 100%.
If anybody wants anything built, talk to Tracy.
Yeah.
Well, I know, Tracy, you wanted to talk a little bit about how American Global can actually provide some preferred pricing for some of these programs.
Well, I think what we've done is we've taken that initiative. We've been listening to where a lot of the SMEs are struggling. And as I said, our clients are customs brokers. We work with customs brokers also through service providers, freight forwarders. But what we found with the technology opportunity is because with the new compliance requirements, with navigating all the things that are happening in trade, having that expert in a very specific industry is really relevant. So we've created through the Center of Influence the ability to meet those CARM requirements through our customs brokers. And we have them all across Canada. We have a number in Quebec, a number in Ontario, BC, all provinces, East Coast, and they have provided those opportunities. So we are happy to connect those dots to help those members get out of the weeds and at least know that there are definitely solutions
we
available.
have the same stakeholders, right?
Right.
So it's,
Right.
We're happy to serve the GCs
So we're happy to
Canada.
connect those dots and make sure that you and that your members know that there is available resources. And that can be a great member benefit. Also talking about it, coming out, helping wherever we can to meet those requirements. So,
well, our commodity for associations is information.
right.
So the more information we can put out to the members, the more informed they are to make decisions, and that's what the costing then comes into effect, right? So we have to make sure that they're aware of all of this stuff. The problem is that sometimes it feels like there's a tidal wave of issues that we have to face.
Right.
When we started the conversation, it was not one thing, and we could talk a week on one topic and a week on another topic. And so how do we get things done right now in order to be able to build is, again, by doing this, sitting down and everyone from, representing different stakeholders, you have to come to an agreement. You have to understand that this is the way we have to do things in order to put a shovel in the ground. And it is not just, it's not no longer in the realm of politics. They can't just make a decision. It has to be done where all stakeholders are at the table.
Absolutely.
Okay, when they do a knee-jerk reaction, we have to pay for it. They have to understand, to Eric's point, no, you messed up. Ditch that one and go a different route or try and backtrack or whatever the case is. The problem I see with most politicians is they don't do that, Eric. They don't ditch stuff. They double down sometimes, and it becomes even more problematic because now they're entrenched.
And we told the government that they were putting so much money in infrastructure, but I said, what about the credit agencies? Aren't you afraid? Because we had a warning, and we said, don't turn down the faucet. But they said just be clever and be careful, and they didn't. So they got a credit rating, and you know what? They stopped all the projects. We knew they were going to do it, they just opened it too quickly. All we needed was predictability. Right. So people know that you hire people, you're going to be able to keep them. I opened, you were talking about cost. I opened that can of worms. Mm-hmm. I did. And, it's not been a few months I've been talking about these things and talking about costs and saying, okay, you want lower cost? Well, cut this stuff. And we started about talking the complexity of projects. Where did we become champion of complexity? What award did we get for that? We don't. We have to be effective.
That's just table stakes now, right?
Yeah. We have to be
Bragging
effective.
rights.
We have to be effective. We have to look other countries, how they made it. They didn't go complex. They go effective. They go, and you go to, people are talking about Denmark, other countries, they're productive, they're not, but how did they do it? We have to look elsewhere. And lots of stuff we have is out of date. Lots of stuff we do must be resumed. So they call me Che Guevara these days. I'm doing so many, no, not in a good aside, but I mean, I'm questioning so many things at this moment.
Yeah, I think we have to as an industry,
Yeah, we do.
It's so I do want to wrap things up here, but I think we talked a little bit about the education, the complexity, the risk, making better decisions. We talked about predictability. I don't think that exists, Eric, right now in the current landscape. We talked about the CARM technology. If you guys could just leave the stakeholders across Canada with a note before we head out here, what would that be in a sentence? Tracy? I
think what we at least got to start to talk about today was the relevance of trying to connect, like using Denmark. How did they do it? Well, I think, again, government needs to understand that these decisions require the stakeholders to be completely involved. Pivoting, nobody's disputing the pivot or the change, but unless we can get to the meat and potatoes and make sure that industry understands the effects of this, then we're not going to be able, we're setting people up to fail. Mm-hmm. And that's not the goal here. The goal is not to set people up to fail, it's to set them up to succeed. Yeah. And if we succeed, we all succeed.
Eric?
I think we're in front of a wall, and we have to either jump over it or turn around.
Get the bulldozer.
Or
Get the bulldozer.
Yeah, get that bulldozer. But this is the idea. We have the status quo doesn't work anymore. We have to, pivot is the good word, but what is more than pivot is like 360 or something. Like we have to do something about this to reposition ourselves to be more competitive, more agile, and. Will be less afraid of unpredictability with that.
I think from, the general contractor's point in Ontario, we can be an asset to the government. Ask us
100%.
Ask us what how you want to navigate this, and we'll provide you with the answers. We're not We like getting things done. We like building stuff. Our tagline is "We build Ontario," and we live it. But the government gets in the way. So again, to Eric's point, we now have a wall. So we need the government to engage with industry way before they launch legislation and cause us into a tailspin where we then have to be reactive. I'd rather be in a proactive mode. So if I can tell my members, listen, in a year's time, this is what's going to happen. This is how you have to prepare for it. This is the freight forwarder or the importer that you have to speak to. This is what, so they get the education prior to, so that there isn't any disruption in building. Right. Instead of what's happening right now where the taps are being shut off, projects are being discontinued or shelved, and everyone is in a panic because it's a knee-jerk reaction. Instead, talk to us. We actually can help you navigate all of this. But unless we're engaged with and manufacturing is engaged with and all the subs are engaged with and the suppliers, nothing is done in isolation. Right. No person is an island. So pull everybody together and let's get through this. And government, unfortunately, you got to talk to us. You can't just
ECI.
Yeah, you can't
early contractor involvement, not only in projects but in legislation making.
In everything.
Absolutely.
In everything.
100%.
Don't look for those sound bites. Don't think that the ribbon cutting thing, that's the panacea of anything. Getting stuff done, and together we can do it.
Right.
Love to get stuff done. Well, with that, very great closing comments from all of you. If there's one thing to take away from this conversation, it's that supply chain is no longer sitting in the background of construction. It's now at the center of how projects succeed or fail. What we're seeing is a shift from managing inputs to managing uncertainty. And that changes everything, from how projects are planned to how they're priced to how risk is understood and transferred, whether it's global trade dynamics, regulatory shifts like CARM, or just the increasing complexity of delivery. The contractors who connect these dots and make better decisions early are going to have the real advantage. Ultimately, the industry is moving toward a simple idea. Better decisions lead to better projects. Really appreciate the insights from all of you today. This was a great conversation. Thank you, Giovanni. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Tracy.
Thank you.
Pleasure was ours.
More to come.
More to come.